Hey, James, how are you doing?
Doing well. Been enjoying these talks.
Not hearing you, James.
Oh, let's see.
Yeah, got you now. Can hear you again.
Got me now? All right. Yeah,
Yeah.
just been enjoying these talks. It's been fantastic.
So have you got yourself involved in the debate about TypeScript on the chat channel yet?
No, I've been avoiding those. Yeah, there's some debates I don't get involved with, and TypeScript ones are definitely among those.
That's fair enough. I know. I don't know whether it's just because I'm incredibly old, but I was looking through some of it and I thought this is strangely reminiscent to when we went from ActionScript 1 to ActionScript 3, and it certainly went strongly typed and all the pain I went through there. So whilst I see all the benefits of typed languages, I've also seen the difficulties of adopting it. So.
Yes, yeah, definitely. TypeScript's a great language, though. I've used it for a number of things. So yeah, it's good stuff.
So I understand that you've just got a new dog as well. So how's that dog settling in?
Yeah. Oh, she is fantastic. She's our quarantine puppy. Got her right at the start of 2020. If I'm not constantly playing ball with her, she's not happy. The ball is constantly, her constant companion. So it's a constant reminder that, I actually need to take breaks when I'm writing code. Go out and throw the ball around with her. She's great. So, in fact,
that's really great.
Here in the slides. So. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, James has been contributing to Node.js since 2015, when he was often reminded that Node.js is not a browser and should not act like one. But it turns out that might not be the case. Is that right, James?
Yeah.
So here we have James with, yes, Node.js is part of the web platform. Over to you, James.
Thanks, Katie. All right. So hello, everybody. As Katie said, I'm James Snell, J.A. Snell, everywhere on Twitter and GitHub and everywhere else. I am a Node core contributor, part of the technical steering committee, which is the governing body for the Node project. And I also recently joined Cloudflare, part of the workers team. Katie was just mentioning our puppy. This is Lala. She has nothing to do with this talk, but I show pictures of her whenever I can. It's kind of like the whole new parent thing, except with dogs. And yes, the ball is always present. It's always there. So she never goes anywhere without it. All right. So yes, Node is a part of the web platform. What do I mean by this? Let me start with an example here. Here's a question. Your answer will likely depend on when you were first introduced to JavaScript, Node, web development in general. But the question is, using JavaScript, what's the correct way to open a file, read its contents, compress it, encrypt it, and write the file back out? Write that compressed encrypted data back out. If you've been around Node for a while, reading this question, you probably have a picture in your head already forming of kind of what APIs you would need to use to do this. But here's the question: is that only going to work in Node? And is Node the only environment where you need to do these types of activities in? Is Node the only environment where you're going to need to use JavaScript to compress or encrypt data? Is it the only environment where you're going to need to stream data in for processing? You can have a picture of how this stuff is supposed to work and how it would work in Node, but how does it work across the entire web? And is it going to be a consistent development experience? Or are you going to have to do it in one way in one environment, a completely different way in another environment? How much trouble and how much pain does those differences across these different environments? How much does that actually cause you? So let's start with the first part of this example. Now, that entire question, kind of that whole data pipeline flow is something that I'll be going through on the workshop that I'm going to be doing on Wednesday, taking some existing Node code and figuring out how to make it work in kind of this web platform standard way. We're going to be going into a lot more detail of that on the workshop that I'm doing. So let's just take the first part. Let's just, the one part about reading the file and just streaming it in. And, here we're just going to print the data to the console. If you've used Node for any length of time, this should look familiar. We have the require fs create read stream. We're using set encoding to specify how we're going to interpret this in terms of text encodings. We're using on, which is part of the event emitter. This API should just look familiar if you've used Node. It's short, it's simple, and it works in Node. But what about other environments? There are no fewer than 6 specific Node APIs and conventions at work in just this simple example. There's, require as part of the Node common JS modules. We have the FS module itself, which is a Node specific API. We have Node streams, again, specific to Node. We have Node's event emitter, Node's buffer object, and Node's encoding conventions. So, what would it take, to take this bit of code and, get it working in, say, Dino, a different, JavaScript runtime environment? The answer is, polyfills, compatibility layers, re-implementing these APIs. You'd have to, take the way Node basically works and port it over to this other environment. And there's activity that's underway to do that. But what if it was just easier to do it in a common way so that we wouldn't have to do that? What if we could reduce the number of Node specific things in here so that you could write a chunk of code in one environment and have it just work in all these different places? And when I talk about kind of that common web platform, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about JavaScript environments, whether it's Node, whether it's Dino, whether it's Cloudflare workers, whether it's the browser, it doesn't matter. All of these different environments doing these things in a common, consistent way. With the Node example here, it's possible for us to simplify it further. We can use this, pipeline method in Node and the process object in Node to, simplify the example even further and make it really nice, clean, consistent. It performs well. But doing this also, just introduces additional Node specific APIs. And that kind of runs counter to the direction we want to go to. We want things to become more consistent across multiple platforms. Now, yes, this is NodeConf. We're here to talk about Node. Why am I talking about these other environments? Well, it's because they exist. They're part of the ecosystem that we operate in. We cannot avoid them. We absolutely cannot ignore them. These are tools and environments and things that developers in our ecosystem, these are what they're using. So we need to keep this cross-platform consistency and compatibility and commonality in mind as we go. So here's a question, and I think the answer to this is pretty straightforward and obvious. Is Node the only JavaScript platform that needs to open and read files? Again, the answer obviously is no. It's not. So why should there be why should we have a Node specific way of opening a file? Why should we have a Dino specific way of opening a file? Why should we have a, Cloudflare or browsers or whatever else, whatever environment? Why should they all do this differently? It makes absolutely no sense. Is Node the only environment where we need data compression, encryption, text encodings, URL parsing, random numbers, making and responding to HTTP requests? And again, the answer to these obviously is no. Now, all of these environments, these tools like Node and Dino and all these things, they will have unique capabilities. They will have unique things that they bring to the table and things that will only work in those environments, right? But there's always going to be this common set of things that work across all these different, that are needed across all these different tools. And those are the things that we need to look at providing a common API for. We use JavaScript to develop at every layer of the web platform. Desktop applications, if you're using Slack, anything Electron based, lots of other applications are desktop applications are being built with JavaScript. Browsers, obviously, there's web browsers that are built with Electron. IoT devices, I have a watch here that we introduced 2 years ago at NodeConf EU that runs JavaScript, right? Servers, backends, we all familiar with Node on the backend. Dino on the back end, other JavaScript environments that the stuff that Bloomberg has done with their custom backend. We also have edge networks, things like, fast caching, Cloudflare workers, and there's these, edge environments that are starting, we're seeing more and more where JavaScript is running there at that caching and CDN layer and data routing layer. So, the JavaScript exists everywhere. Let's make sure that all of these environments are doing things in a consistent way. All right, now, every time, this conversation pops up, I'm going to pick on Brian here a little bit because he's a friend of mine, and I can. Every time this question comes up, we get, some pushback about, it's like, okay, generally speaking, servers are not browsers. Node's not a browser, right? And nor should it ever pretend to be. But Node does do a lot of the same stuff web browsers do. We just went through that list. Browsers are starting to do a lot of the same stuff Node does. Edge networks starting to do a lot of the same stuff, and the watches, right? They're not any of these things. They're not browser servers or edge networks, but they still do a lot of the same things. So we will see this pushback. We will see this questioning. It's like, well, how far do we go on implementing these common APIs? And how far do we go for making these things work the same? And we'll get into this a little bit more later. But this is, one of the significant pieces of pushback that we get whenever we talk about implementing some new web API in Node. And this has been consistent, right when I started with Node in 2015, as Katie was mentioning, one of my, the first arguments that was made is Node's not a browser. Just stop making it look like one. I actually got yelled at by another Node contributor at the time, for introducing the URL parser, like actually yelled at in the hallway at a conference. So, it was, there's been some, it hasn't been without its controversy. It hasn't been without, opinions, but it is something that we are moving to. And since I'm picking on Brian, I'm just gonna I'll throw a quick advertisement out here. Multi-threaded JavaScript book that Thomas Hunter and Brian just wrote is absolutely fantastic book if you're doing multi-threaded JavaScript using worker threads or workers in browsers, that kind of thing. I'm a little biased. It's got an amazing forward. Once you take a look at it, you'll understand why I say that. But it is an excellent book. Go out and make sure you pick up a copy. All right, let's go back to the example. So, like I said, on the workshop that I am doing on Wednesday, I'm going to go through this in a lot more detail. We're going to take a look at some code that runs in Node, what I would consider legacy Node code, and kind of how we would port that and re-envision that so that it's all based on as much as possible on web platform APIs. But let's just start with this quick example: opening the file, streaming the data out as UTF-8. Right. So how can we start converting this over to the web platform? What does that mean? Well, the first thing we can do is instead of using CommonJS, let's use ECMAScript modules. So instead of using require FS, we're going to use this import from FS. This is controversial. ESM is not perfect. There's still a lot of pain with converting all this existing JavaScript code and Node code and stuff over to ESM. Not all the tools work nicely together. ESM is not as flexible. It doesn't work as well with diagnostic tools. There's some missing functionality there. But the more it's used, the better it'll get. The better the tools will get. The more pressure we get from developers actually going out and trying to use it, then the developers working on the platform and the tooling, we'll continually work to make it better. So it's one of those things where we have there's going to be a short period of some pain converting over to ESM. But ESM is the standard. It's part of the language. And, it works in Node, it works in Dino, it works in browsers, it works in workers, it works in all these different, JavaScript environments, we are well past the time where we have one module loading system for Node and another module loading system for everything else. We need one module loading system for this entire ecosystem, for this environment. And even with its warts, even with the issues that it has, ESM is that one module loading system that we need to start moving to. I know not everyone is going to agree to that, right? And I fully expect, some folks on Twitter to say, no, not going to, we'll never do this. But this is the direction that things really ought to be heading. So that's the first change we can make. Switch, from CommonJS to ECMAScript modules. The other significant change, and this one that's been happening for a while, switching to promises rather than Node-style callbacks. We have been going through and enabling promise support throughout Node's API. It's not quite all there yet. There's still lots of warts, things that don't quite, that aren't quite as elegant. But the more we move away from that, what I would consider a legacy callback pattern, into that promises, and promises are, I did a whole workshop on all the ways that people get promises wrong. So they can be difficult. They can be hard to get right. But once you work with them for a while, they become a much more natural way of working with this asynchronous data. So we really need to start moving more and more and more away from callbacks and into promises. Using async iterators instead of stream APIs. Yes, we do have the WhatWG streams now in Node, called web streams in Node. Those do work, but to be honest, using those async iterators, this for-await pattern, is a much more idiomatic, language level idiomatic way of dealing with this streaming data that's coming in to be processed. So we don't want to use an event emitter pattern. We don't want to use an event target or necessarily a stream API directly. When we can just for-await and have the runtime do all that work for us under the covers, we just process one chunk of data as it comes in at a time. This for-await pattern should really become the de facto way of dealing with this streaming data in these JavaScript runtimes. Right, but we're not quite done yet. Using text decoder and typed arrays instead of things like the Node buffer API and Node's encoding conventions. Text decoder is an object that exists in browsers and Node exists in all these different environments, and it's specifically designed to figure out I'm going to interpret this chunk of binary data as a UTF-8 text or UTF-16 text. Right, and it just works. In Node, a buffer object is also a uint8 array, a typed array. So here we change the example to not use any of the Node specific buffer API stuff and just treat it as if it's a uint8 array using the standard API, and we achieve the same result. We're just decoding it as text and writing it out to the console. Now, just as and by the by, console log is also a standard web API, right? It's been in Node forever, but it's also, also works in browsers. It works in all these different environments, and there's a web API spec for console. So we have that there. Now, there are still Node specific things in here. Now, specifically, the FS Promises API is still Node specific, but we have ESM, text decoder, async iterators, console. These are all JavaScript and web platform standards. These are things that will work across all of these different environments, regardless of where you're at. Now, here's a question, though. Why can't we have a standard FS module, a standard way of opening files that works across all these environments? Something I'd like to work on. It's something it's a conversation I'd like to have with the Dino folks and across these other platforms and say, well, hey, if we have these other pieces that are standard and common, and we all need to open files, why can't we do that in a consistent way across these environments as well and have a standard API for this? So, some of these things exist. Some things are still conversations that are ongoing. But in this example, you see we've taken it from being completely 100% Node specific to, only having one part of this that is specific to the Node platform. Now, I kind of want to, move on. Like I said, in the workshop, I'll go through that example in a lot more detail, and we'll do more stuff with it. It's like an hour. We'll have a whole hour and a half to work on that. But MDN Web Docs, if you look at the Web APIs page, it's an excellent reference. It has 91 separate API specifications as part of the collection of web APIs, and over 1,000 separate interface and objects implemented by browsers. The API surface area, the term we use, for how much these environments offer to developers to use, is massive, right? They do a lot of things, and one of the legitimate question is how much of this should Node actually implement? How much of this should Dino implement? How much of this should environments like Workers implement? There's always this slippery slope argument that comes up. It's like, when I introduced URL, the URL parser, there was an argument that was made. Well, does that mean you're just going to implement the entire DOM API? And it's like, no, that's silly. Node will never come close to implementing anywhere close to all of these APIs. No one has ever advocated implementing all of these things. And there is going to be far more in that web API, kind of that full surface area. There's always going to be far more there that will never get implemented directly in the runtime, and that makes sense. So what does make sense? what have we already got? And what else is left? What else do we have to do? Now, I just want to kind of go back to what Brian's coming there. Generally speaking, servers are not browsers. That is 100%, absolutely, unquestionably, completely, totally correct, right? These are different types of runtimes, different types of platforms, running in different environments for different reasons. There will always be a need for these things to have their own APIs, conventions, patterns, their own legacy concerns, right? There's backwards compatibility concerns that Node has that Dino will never have. There's the environments like Cloudflare workers have, in Fastly Cache and those kind of things. They have constraints and things that are unique about those environments, which means, it's okay if they work differently than other environments, right? So I'm not erasing any of that or questioning any of that, but there is a common set. So what platform APIs do work in Node today? And what might be we working on in the future? So we have things like WebAssembly. It's there. Node. WASI is experimental. It's being developed. WASI is a system interface that, combined WebAssembly and WASI, depending on how that evolves, could completely replace the need for most native add-ons in Node and do it in a way that works across platforms. So we can have, one bit of, one WASI and WebAssembly module that works in Node, that also works in Dino, that also works in workers, that also works in the browser. So you don't have to write to these platform-specific native APIs. URL parser was added back in Node 6. You have the blob API for working with binary data, message port, message channel, broadcast channel for communicating across multiple threads, abort controller and abort signal for doing cancellation semantics. Event target now are in Node, text encoder, decoder. You got the various types of streams that are consistent. You can create readable streams, writable streams now. Web crypto API was added last year. These are all things that are standard APIs that are going to work consistently, regardless of which of these JavaScript environments that you're running in, and that's critical. Now, everything on this screen is what I would consider kind of the core of the web platform APIs that have to work consistently across all these different environments. There's a lot. Going back to the MDN screen, there's a lot on there. There's a lot of APIs on there, most of which will never be relevant. The ones on this screen are the ones that I say that I personally believe are relevant, that should work consistently across everything. So everything over here and kind of the bullet list, WebAssembly, URL, those are all things that work today, right? The things in the black square, these are things that we still have yet to look at. So there's a new URL pattern API out there. The Weblogs API, it's existed for a little while, but really hasn't gained much traction. But as I mentioned, can we have a common file system API? What about raw sockets? Why do we have to have a different way of opening a raw socket in Node and Dino and all these different environments? Why can't we have a single consistent API that gives us a minimum level of functionality? And why can't we have diagnostic APIs that work consistently across all these environments and have those also be part of that set of web platform APIs? So here, obviously, if you look at this, like I said, everything that's in this this one side, WebAssembly and web crypto and all these things are things that already work. So, we've done a tremendous amount of we've put a tremendous amount of effort into ensuring that these things work in Node today. It's been a task over several years. Most of this is still kind of experimental. The readable stream implementation is still experimental. It was just added back in July. The web crypto implementation, it's usable, but it's still experimental, and that's because we haven't ported all of the we haven't proven quite that we're 100% compatible yet by pulling in the web platform tests. But there's other things like timer APIs, right, that have been there for forever, that are very stable. So this set, these are the ones, and on the workshop that I go on Wednesday, these are the APIs that I'm going to be going through. Now, you should notice down at the bottom, I have Fetch API, and this may be a surprise to some. Like, Fetch isn't in Node. Well, it's not in Node core. It's not. If you install Node, it's not going to be there. But there is a Fetch implementation from the Node project that's available. It's just available as a separate installable module called Untitled. You can add this, using npm or yarn. It is an official Node project. It's a new HTTP client that is being worked on with the intention of replacing the existing HTTP client that's in Node core right now. It does implement Fetch, and it's a standard compliant version of Fetch. It works really well, very performant. you can install this. And like I said, yes, it is part of the Node project. So, not everything here is directly in Node itself, but, it is stuff that we have been working on. And, there was this old joke, stop trying to make fetch happen and stuff. Well, we made it happen. We ignored all that. It took us a long time to get there, but we are there. So what to expect next? Conversations have kicked off between Node, Dino workers, I say Cloudflare, workers as Cloudflare workers on a common raw sockets API. This is, going to be, kind of a minimum thing for at least opening and communicating over those sockets so that it's not being done in a different way in every environment. I'm hoping to have more information on that, a little bit later this year. But we at least started the conversations on that. Recently I joined the Cloudflare workers team, in one of the first tasks I'm taking on with that environment is ensuring that their implementations of things like readable streams and event target and all these core common APIs is actually up to specs. That they're fully compliant, and that that we're implementing that common subset of APIs consistently across these environments. And I want to have similar conversations with, I'm watching, Dino. They're doing a fantastic job of providing consistent implementation of these things, and looking at other environments as well to say, hey, let's make this kind of the de facto standard library. We'll continue, to evolve Node support for these standard APIs, patterns, and specs without, this is the key thing, without sacrificing backwards compatibility and ecosystem stability. But while enabling these common patterns to start to emerge. So that's the short story of this. I will be doing we do have my workshop on Wednesday. It starts kicks off at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. There's still a number of seats available for that, and we're going to be, like I said, we're going to be going through some code that would be considered kind of legacy idiomatic Node code for processing data, and moving that incrementally over to as much on the web platform APIs as we possibly can, and showing kind of what that new idiomatic way of looking at that data processing pipeline, what that would be, and what the trade-offs and what those kind of what you have to know in order to be successful with that way of writing the code. So that'll be on Wednesday. I think again 10:30 Pacific time, and definitely hope to see you there. And that's the short version of this. If anybody wants to ask about this, debate this stuff, feel free to hit me up on Twitter. I'm J.A. Snell on Twitter. And with that's it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, James. And well done for plugging your workshop. I was going to try and cover that, but it's only 20 euros, people, and it's all going to a very, very good cause. And you will learn about this stuff in so much more detail. So I do have some questions for you, James. So this first one is from Brian, who also thanks you for plugging his book. Can the web platform take things from Node? I.e., can things go in the opposite direction? And he's thinking of things like async hooks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think up to this point, there's been this perception of the web platform APIs, even by the folks writing the specs, that the browser developers are the ones that are in control of that. The only thing that becomes a web platform API standard is what the browsers say. And honestly, I think it's time for those of us working on Node and Dino and these other environments to say, no, we're also here. We're also at the table, and we also have really good ideas to bring to the table. In particular, things around diagnostic APIs, async hooks, or there's diagnostic reporting APIs and things like that are starting to be built into Node that I think should absolutely be looked at as kind of web platform APIs that are implemented consistently across all these different environments. And things like going back to raw sockets API, right? There's a ton there, right? Node is the de facto standard API for that kind of stuff. If we are going to introduce those things, that type of functionality into the web platform API set, then we absolutely have to look at Node and these other environments to draw from and learn from and contribute to. So yeah, without question.
Okay, thank you for that. Casper has a question for you. Will Node ever support remote dependencies like Dino does?
There absolutely is an effort going on, and for folks that may not be familiar, the remote dependencies is basically import from a HTTP URL, some bit of code that's hosted on another server. Bradley Frias, BMEC, has done he's at GoDaddy. He's done a tremendous amount of work on this, just and doing some early investigation on what it would take to support these HTTP imports from Node, how to do it in a secure way. We've put some effort into kind of building out what the threat model, security model for those things would be. I know that Bradley's had some other things that he's had to prioritize, so I think he's kind of looking for some other people to take over that bit of work. But it's been started. There's actually a PR, I think, that at least gets it started. That's just waiting for somebody to take over and kind of push it along. But yeah, absolutely, I definitely envision a world where that's at least possible. Whether it's exactly like what Dino does, yet to be seen. I know that there are some security concerns with the way that Dino does it. So there's some, I think it's going to be one of those things where Node will come up with its implementation in its way, and then we'll have a conversation about, okay, how do we make these things more consistent?
Sure. That's an interesting, and Bradley has also got a workshop on over the next couple of days as well. So I'll give him a little plug too, because I know he's got some spaces left there. Final question again from Brian again. Are we explicitly ruling out built-in DOM implementation in Node?
I am. I'll never do it. Somebody else could. Node has no roadmap, and Node has no one person that can say no to and block everything. So it all depends on kind of what the contributors, what the majority of the contributors say and what people want to put their time into. But me personally, I don't think there's any value in having a built-in DOM implementation in the Node platform itself. So it's not something that I will ever put work into.
Okay, well, thank you very much, James. And I'm going to wave you off into the abyss now. So thanks very much for your time and for your talk, and look forward to the workshop in the next couple of days.